Eagle 1, first strike. You have permission to engage the target.
Welcome back, Perseverance Pioneers, to the Perseverance Mindset Podcast. I am your host, as you know me, John Zedzer. We're coming to you once again, live from the Dialogue Den. And boy, do we have a lot to unpack for you today. And today, I need you to lean in close, very close on this. Picture this. It's the dead of night on a desert airstrip. Engines hum low. Their vibrations felt more than heard. Ground crews move with disciplined silence under a certain view of the stars. Stealth bombers, some of the most powerful machines ever engineered on God's green earth, wait in the shadows. Every pilot is briefed, every target is identified, and every decision is on a knife's edge. And halfway across the world, President of the U.S., Donald Trump, sits in a situation room surrounded by top generals. They brief him on their options. Could this all be ended simply with a phone call between the United States, Iran, diplomacy, what happens next in these types of situations? Honestly, there's a range of things that could happen. One diplomatic exchange, from pulling these bombers back into their air hangars and choosing dialogue over the potential destruction that could just occur. Those are the facts. That is what we are witnessing. But as of this morning, it appears that call hasn't happened. Those dialogues haven't been engaged. And it seems like just folks aren't willing to talk or aren't willing to actually get the job done to avoid this. Iran seems to be having other conversations with other nations and leaders of the world. But as of this morning, that's where we stand right now, and on the precipice of decisions that will ripple across history. For a lot of us, post 9/11, we've seen a lot of this episode before, but completely different scenario. U.S. homeland was attacked. New York City was attacked. Twin Towers were attacked. Innocent Americans being at work in one of the major cities in the world were attacked. Different times, but we've seen how the similar scenarios like this play out. So in this episode, we're going to deep dive. We'll unpack what's going on as of today, because there's a lot of stuff going on, why these bombers are even on the move, which we just heard today as well, and what options the president is weighing, and what happens if nobody sends that phone call or answers that phone. And yes, we'll also look at some of the irony of this whole thing. Sometimes all we can do is that a simple phone call, simple dialogue could avoid all this. But are we past that point? So by the end of this episode, you'll have a deeper understanding of what this tense moment means for America, Iran, Israel, and the world. But most of all, you'll also be reminded that every choice matters. And decisions like this, every little choice, every voice, every person of interest, every diplomat or leader that is around this situation, every voice matters, because everyone needs to hear what the potential consequences of these actions might resort to, i.e., sons and daughters of America being sent to Iran post of an action of this even occurring. It's a real situation. It's a real circumstance. It's a real scenario. And every effort to talk before we send those bombers to do other unspeakable acts to carry out their mission can make all the difference. So buckle up, pioneers. Here we go. Let's get into it. First up, let's set the scene as of this morning, as to news that many of us had no idea was coming. Just face the fact. Overnight, B-2 Spirit stealth bombers deployed to a forward base in Europe. Their sleek shapes lurking on the tarmac, the U.S. military is officially on heightened alert. This is besides the aircraft carriers that are already positioning themselves to be closer to Iran for a range of reasons, as you might assume. So behind closed doors, our president and his National Security Council have been locked in intense meetings, decide whether to strike Iranian military assets after a series of escalations that have built up over months. Now, I know what everyone's saying. Are you saying that on this podcast that we want Iran to have nuclear weapons? No. Hell no. Completely NO. But do I want American sons and daughters to pay the price for such an action happening that could entrench us in another 20-year conflict and cost hundreds of billions and thousands of millions of dollars? Yes, that's what I'm saying. How we deal with this scenario is going to write the history books for years to come. We have just pulled out of the Afghanistan Operation Iraqi Freedom War. And now we're talking about engaging yet another one to spend endless price tags and, more importantly, American lives. Yeah, this is serious. Any strike could provoke counterattacks on anyone involved. More drone strikes, missile barrages, even cyber attacks right here on American soil. These are realities. These are things that could happen. Meanwhile, Iran's supreme leader is issuing his own warnings through state media, vowing retaliation if America crosses a red line. Let's just say this. For a country that often shouts death to America and wants to see much harm inflicted upon America, a country that calls Israel the little evil and calls America the big evil, I don't think they would have the best interest at heart to us and our country anyway, just to be honest. That's where we stand right now, poised between talk and that trigger, or more appropriately, that stealth bomber lifting off and that final button mission control of dropping that bunker buster. So now let's give more context and backstory of what all this has been going on. Let's rewind for just a moment. Lean back, grab your drink, grab your coffee, whatever you're drinking this June 21st of the year of 2025. So this isn't an overnight crisis. If anybody's telling you that this just happened and all this just brought up, all this just came out of nowhere, completely wrong, not even paying attention. This is decades in the making. The roots of the US-Iran tensions stretch back to 1979, the Iranian Revolution, through the Iran-Iraq War, the hostage crisis, of course, and more recently, the Iran nuclear deal that was first celebrated, then it was scrapped and tossed to the side. For pretty prevalent reasons, I might add, but more recently, proxy battles across the Middle East, drone strikes, and the shadowy cyber attacks that are happening daily by many countries and nations in the world all the time now. It's just a normality. And President Trump trying to walk a fine line. I applaud him for doing it. He's walked a fine line so far. But if anybody remember in our last episode, we were talking about everything happening with Kim Jong-un and everything that there was going to be a nuclear winter, that he had the official first weapon of mass destruction, another self-proclaimed weapon of mass destruction, was firing rockets, and they earned themselves the nickname Rocket Man. But the president to this point has walked a fine line, and I applaud him for taking more time into his decision making. I think everything we're seeing now is just very strategically placing things in the event that decision is made. But I think if we get to 2 weeks, I think a 2-week time frame of seeing who will come to the table, who will make those phone calls, who will be willing to talk about anything is a good starting point. But from his standpoint, touting himself as a deal maker in business and now currently in politics, who'd rather walk and talk that fine line than fight? I'm sure this all would be loved. Everyone would love to see this settled over a phone call, a trade deal, a negotiation, a new accord of some sort, then fight it out. But he also showing that he'll flex the U.S. power if pushed too far. So we're all watching this pressure cooker. We're all watching this massive pressure cooker happening. I would equate it to a huge pot of barbecue from your local Chipotle, because it's bubbling, it's seething, but it hasn't popped to the point where that lid has exploded off yet. And that might be all the timing we need to actually get this fixed without American boots on the ground, without American action, military action. But again, speaking of someone with experience, I've had a family member that has served his country for years. Many of my family have served our country in many wars, many conflicts, many branches of service. But we have to understand there is a cost to these ongoing foreign conflicts year after year, decade after decade. We just got out of one. Now we're talking about going right into another. I think that's where, for many people, hear that and they go, pause, just pause on this right now. I understand all the circumstances and everything that's being talked about, but right now, is this really what we want in the middle of facing crippling debt, our inflation, and everything else happening out there? But now let's talk strategy. What could happen if the president gives the green light? So we've just heard today that stealth bombers could hit targets deep inside. We just heard today that these stealth bombers have moved today. As of today, 6, I think, and other aircraft carriers are getting in position. But there was that it's said that these stealth bombers could hit targets deep inside Iran with very great precision. Iran could counter that fast with its own missiles or attacks on shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz, and it could lead to a whole another bunch of issues. So here's the one thing. Conflicts like this rarely stay idle. One bomb can spark a dozen counter bombs, spiral into a regional war, or draw in outside powers like Russia or China. You don't think they're paying attention with everything happening on right now, especially with Russia, Ukraine still ongoing, Israel, Hamas, that conflict is still ongoing, still waiting for a conflict or resolution there. And remember, there's no going back. Once that first shot is fired, once that first stealth bomber makes its way overhead and opens those bomb bay doors, and those targets are obliterated, like I'm sure they would be, there's no going back from that. That's the risk on the table today. Knock on wood. It's why the stakes feel higher than they've been in years with this type of action that's being suggested or just weighed, as all presidents do. All presidents weigh decisions for war or conflict or action, swift military action, but it feels like it's just a different type of environment here. But there's another option, and it doesn't require those bomb bay doors to open. It doesn't require those stealth bombers to form formations and just wipe out under new targets. Can we talk about the irony for a second? Imagine what could have happened if someone had heard of this conflict happening, heard of this raging between Iran and Israel, picked up the phone, requested an immediate meeting between the leaders and say, hey, we need to pause on this. This is already getting out of hand. And look, we've seen everything that's been happening to Israel. Horrible attacks on October 7th, being targeted, all the things happening in the United States right now on American university. We've seen that. We've seen this despicable and it's disgusting. It's abhorrent. We've seen this. But we have to know that endless conflict after endless conflict doesn't lead to peace. We have to know that. And I know diplomacy isn't easy, but history tells us that the most dangerous conflicts have often been avoided by a well-timed conversation at just the right time. Think back to the Cuban Missile Crisis. You had President Kennedy on one side, and you had the leader of the Soviet Union, Khrushchev, on the other, exchanging letters, messages, calls. That's what prevented World War III at that time. And here we are, millions on edge, when one simple phone call, conversation, summit meeting in a mutual location could change this whole game. Let's hope that's where we get to. Let's hope we get to a point where this is resolved and leaders can meet and end this whole ordeal. If this wasn't so serious, it would almost be funny. Almost. But let's look at some of the historical parallels between where we are at this point now and where we are historically. There are some important lessons to remember here today. With all these actions and everything that's moving and swirling around and flying overhead, no pun intended, there are some important lessons to remember. In 1962, the world held its breath as the Soviet ships steamed toward the U.S. blockade. President Kennedy and Khrushchev chose to speak directly and de-escalated that nuclear standoff completely, wholeheartedly. 1988, a miscommunication between the U.S. and Iran led to the accidental downing of Iran Flight 655, a tragedy, complete tragedy, that could have been avoided with better communication. And that's the real thread through history. Talking can save lives. Summits and diplomacy can stop bloodshed. Talking can prevent the unimaginable. Hell, that's why we have leaders. That's why we have elected leaders, correct? That's the lesson we need to hang on to in times like these. That's for sure. And that's the message we're putting out here at the Perseverance Mindset Podcast. So what does this mean for us? John, I'm not really involved for this stuff. I just see it on the news. I just want to tune into a podcast to just give me what I need to know. You might be thinking, That's happening all at the top. What can I do? Like, how does this affect me? That's a fair question, to be honest. But believe me, public awareness and public acknowledgement truly matter. When citizens demand careful, measured decisions, that's when we call our leaders, our representatives, even leading up to the president, to exhaust what decisions we want implemented, what the public opinion is. They trigger, they listen. Your voice, your engagement, and your commitment to being informed on these issues and what's happening in the world shapes decisions that are made every day in our world. And that's what we're doing exactly what we're doing on this podcast. Our Perseverance Mindset podcast is all about equipping our perseverance pioneers to do their research, to be involved, to be engaged, to do their homework on issues and matters, and to also never stop learning. Life is a continuous cycle of learning and bettering yourself. And that's part of your power, the power of perseverance and staying informed and speaking up. Never underestimate that, of our perseverance pioneers. Never underestimate that. From being a law-abiding citizen to always speaking up. Never underestimate the power of that. All right, so we are very active on X and TikTok, so we just wanted to also call out some comments that we did have on the podcast. So David from a local town in Ohio writes, do you think a diplomatic solution is still possible? Short answer is yes. Every crisis can end in a negotiation. Table those thoughts if leaders truly want to. That's for sure. Next, we also have Sarah. Sarah in Texas commented on one of our posts about this. How can we stay updated without falling into the media hype? Sarah, I have to say it's a great question. The tip out there is stick to independent sources, follow for official government updates, and independent journalists who stick to just facts. Just the facts, just knowing what you need to know, and then making an independent, informed decision from that point. So those are some recent comments by some of our subscribers and faithful listeners out there. And quite frankly, couldn't have said it better myself. So everyone here at the Perseverance Mindset Podcast, we hope everyone is having a great weekend, a great Saturday. It's winding down in the end of June. And we want to see a peaceful end to this conflict. We do. We truly do. We hope that all the leaders, Israel, the U.S., and Iran, can get to that table and end these war of words, these tweets, these messages on state media, and come to a peaceful solution. I believe that's what we all want. So before we wrap up, let's take a breath together for all of our faithful listeners and subscribers. The world can feel tense and insane at moments, utterly unpredictable, especially in times like this when you're hearing B-2 bombers moving closer to areas where there's a lot of noise and things happening. But I want you to remember one thing. Remember your voice, your choices, your commitment to calm and to reason. They ripple outward in ways, you might not see. As long as we keep choosing to listen, to talk, to have a commitment to diplomacy and peace, I don't think there's ever any limit to what we can achieve in this great country. We keep the door open for a better way forward. And to be honest, that's the real perseverance mindset. So everyone, thank you for joining me today on our journey. Pioneers, until next time, stay strong, stay brave, and most importantly, keep going and never give up. Have a great weekend.